Thank you for joining us tonight as we do our all hands presentation. This is the second one of the year, and we try to do one every other, or at least one every 6 months or so, to make sure employees are aware of the financial status of the community and also what our initiatives are, to give everyone an opportunity to ask any questions they might have or to give input. And then any input we receive, we forward on to the council. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started for tonight. First, as always, we'll give a financial update. Looking at our local economy here, it's been a tremendous year, 2021. Looking at the general sales tax, which that is the sales tax that is paid for any goods that are purchased in the community. So for example, if you spend $100 at Lynn's, you would be paying a $6.50 sales tax. $4.50 goes to the state. $2 comes to the city. Of the $2, $1 is provided and deposited into our general fund. The general fund is what pays for public safety, so law enforcement, fire, and also a large portion of ambulance. And in addition, it pays for the library, the community center, parks, recreation, streets, all those different services. So $1 or 1% of the sales tax goes to the general fund, and then 10 cents goes to our equipment replacement fund. That is a fund that pays for new machinery and equipment, largely with public works, but also some city hall vehicles and other things like that. And then 90 cents is deposited into our capital improvement fund. And that's what pays for new park upgrades as well as street repaving projects, different things like that. So what has been just an absolutely phenomenal year so far, just to highlight January through September, that's the latest numbers that we have so far. So September of 21 compared to September of 20, sales tax is up 21%. So the taxable sales were up 21%. For the first 9 months of the year, so January through September of 21 compared to January through September of 2020, sales tax is up 13.4%. And 2020 was a fantastic year for sales. And so sales are really increasing quickly in Sturgis. If you talk to almost any local retailer, they'll tell you that last year was a phenomenal year, and this year has just surpassed that by leaps and bounds. It's been fantastic for grocery stores, for all of our tourist attractions, for restaurants, just really across the board for everyone. It's been a great year. And really what that goes to show is that the city's continued focus on growth of our residential population, which over the past 5 years has really grown over 5%. And also tourism development is making a tremendous impact for our retailers. And that in turn, of course, makes a significant impact for the local community. So we can invest more in infrastructure, so we can invest more in our employees. The tourism sales tax has actually even exceeded just the 2%. Looking at the month of September of 21 compared to the month of September of 20, was up 32%, just unreal numbers. And then the first 9 months of this year compared to the first 9 months of last year, we are up 26.8%. This tourism tax, it's also sometimes called the triple B tax. That is the extra 1% sales tax that is paid when you stay on a hotel inside the city limits of Sturgis, if you eat at a restaurant, or if you purchase alcohol. So all of those items, you have to pay an extra 1%. And so instead of it being a 6.5%, it's 7.5%. So any of those sorts of services, 4.5% goes to the state, 2% goes to the city, and then 1% goes to this tourism fund. So it has been just an absolutely fantastic year in our tourism growth industry. It's been fantastic for the community. Then looking at our revenue and expenses comparisons through the month of September, when you look at our general fund revenue, we've seen a significant spike in revenue. You can see year over year, it's kind of been a gradual climb and an increase. This year has been a fantastic increase. A lot of that has been from rally revenue, as well as the sales tax revenue, which we've gone over. But then in addition, we did get some additional revenue from some of the federal bills that were passed earlier this year. When you look at the general fund expenses, that also has shown a large increase. The reason the expenses on the general fund increase so high is because of the purchase of 2 new ambulances that were paid for out of the general fund. So we transferred money from the general fund into ambulance, and then the ambulance fund actually ended up purchasing those 2 new ambulances. So you see the expenses on the general fund side as well as the ambulance fund. And then also our settlement with SMRI, which we'll go over in a few minutes. In the water fund, you can see our revenue was actually down slightly compared to last year, which is kind of odd given that this year was a very dry year. The reason it was down, though, is that because we have grown as a community, the city council was able to reduce our overall water rates this year. They reduced water and wastewater rates in January. They did slightly increase the sanitation rates. The increase in sanitation was not enough to offset the reduction in water and wastewater. So our water fund revenue did decline slightly, but not tremendously. That in addition, if you look at our expenses are not as high as what our water fund revenue was. And so what that means is we're saving extra money. That money stays in the water fund, and it means every few years we're able to do new water projects out of our savings and not take out a new loan. The wastewater fund, you can see a significant spike in new revenue this year. That's even though we reduced our wastewater rate. The reason why there's an increase in revenue collections is because of some additional revenue that we got unexpectedly from the federal government. We got about $750,000 several months ago, and so we're able to use that towards our wastewater treatment plant. So the next bar over with a huge jump there is our wastewater fund expenses. The reason that has increased so much over the last 3 years has been the construction of the wastewater treatment plant, which now the plant is fully operational. We're going through punch list items. It's a tremendous success for us as a community. We're now compliant with the EPA requirements, and we have additional capacity that we can continue to grow. Looking at other communities that are building the same plant, we're doing it at a mere fraction of the cost of what the other communities have had. So it really is a very good project that we are just about finished. Looking at our sanitation fund, our revenue did increase slightly, and again, that's because of our changes that we did to the sanitation rate structure earlier this year, and our expenses are slightly lower than what our revenue has been, but that's leading to a surplus that we're able to save in that account so that we can purchase a new garbage truck, and those garbage trucks run at about $350,000. So they're quite expensive, and you have to save quite a while so that you can afford that. In our ambulance fund, you can see that the revenue has spiked significantly. Much of that is because our number of runs have increased by almost 20% this year. In addition to that, though, our billing has been fantastic. But and also our rural Meade ambulance district is now starting to provide some funding for the ambulance service. And also, as I said before, we transferred money from the general fund over to the ambulance fund, so that came into the revenue. Then that same amount is also shown in the expenses when we purchase the new ambulances. Any questions on that? All right. Moving on, looking at our cash comparison through the end of September. This is in our general fund. Through the end of September, we finished off the third quarter with just under $3.7 million in the bank of the general fund. That really is fantastic. Cities are supposed to maintain a reserve of about 20%. That's a recommended minimum. That way cities are able to respond if there's an emergency or a disaster like flooding or winter storms, that sort of thing, because even if they are declared an emergency by the president, the cities still have to pay all the upfront costs. And then it often takes 1 to 3 years before the revenue comes back from the feds to reimburse the portion that the feds are willing to reimburse. And so cities have to have the savings so that they can respond to those sorts of events. Also to make sure that if there's a hiccup in the economy or if there's some sort of issue, that the community can continue to proceed without making drastic changes. And so you can see that Our reserve in our general fund has continued to grow over the years. Again, 10 years ago, at this point, it was just about 800,000, and now we're at 3.6, 3.7 million. And growth in construction, our planning and permitting department has been completely just busy beyond belief. When you look at the amount of growth that we have in our community, this year we're already at 93 new housing units that have been permitted, and there's still more coming in. It is looking like we might possibly get to 100 units this year, which would be by far an all-time high. Actually, that number of 93 is already more than the 5 years from 2008 to 2012. That was just over 70 units, and so it's amazing to see that in 1 year's time we're growing faster than we did over half of a decade. It really shows that Sturgis has a great quality of life, that people are wanting to move here, either to raise families or to retire here. It's fantastic to see. Our assessed valuation continues to increase with all that growth, and so that's one way that we're able to spread out the property tax burden over kind of more and more residents. So we're not collecting additional property tax revenue. Instead, what we're able to do is the cost of government that's used or that's funded through property tax, we're able to spread that out over more and more people who are helping to pay for that, which is allowing us to reduce our property tax level. This year, we will greatly exceed 24 million. We still have a lot of permits, including our senior living facility, that have not completely finalized all their permits, and so that number will increase a lot. But again, looking at a 5-year period from 2018 to 2012, we already have more than exceeded that in valuation. So it's fantastic to see that we are growing at such a level. Also, something that is not really talked about much, but really should be, and I think the community should really take a lot of credit for, is the increasing business environment that we have throughout the community as well as downtown. It's really becoming a significant renaissance. I received an email from a business owner in July of this year, a very long-time business owner, that said the business environment in downtown Sturgis is better now than at any time since the 1970s. That's a tremendous achievement for our community that we really should be really appreciative of all the entrepreneurs that are stepping up and really doing a fantastic job downtown. When you look at the past 10 years, so from 2011 to 2021, the number of year-round businesses in our downtown area has increased by 43%. That's a significant increase. Seasonal businesses, so businesses that are open for at least 3 months out of the year, that number is increased by 333%. And then rally-only businesses have fallen by 46%. That's a significant achievement. And now what we're starting to see is that there are more businesses that want to open downtown, but the existing businesses that still are available throughout most of the year, that are owned by, unfortunately, out-of-state or out-of-area landowners, and they're not willing to lease their properties. And so right now we have 3 different businesses that want to open downtown, but unfortunately they can't, even though we have spaces that are empty right now. They're not able to open up because the landowners are not willing to lease it out because they have intentions of coming back for the rally and they don't want to move out their merchandise. Unfortunately, that's not something that the city can require. Legally, a city in South Dakota has no authority to require businesses to be open a certain number of days or throughout the entire year, anything like that. That's impossible for a community to require that. But we have made significant strides in increasing the business environment downtown and making it a better place to do business, and we're starting to see those results. In fact, these numbers would be even better if you take into consideration 3 businesses that in 2011 were downtown have actually expanded in our community, which is fantastic. But when they expanded outside the downtown area. That was Flex Fitness, Black Hills Laundry, and Black Hills Energy, all 3 of which greatly expanded their footprints, but did so outside the downtown core. This is just a number or a sampling of some of the businesses that have opened up in our community since 2015. You can see it's a broad stretch of different businesses, everything from tourism to personal services to financial services, a significant growth in the number of retailers in our community and types of retail, and also a lot of additional new jobs to our community. The ones that are highlighted in yellow are businesses that the city directly assisted either through an economic development loan, of which all of them are current, or through a TIF or some other mechanism to assist them to be able to be open. But again, for a community of 7,000 people, that's a significant increase in our community. One that when we talk with other communities in our state of similar sizes, no one's have that sort of growth, which has been fantastic to see. Next, every May, our council gets together, and that's when the new council members are sworn in, and they come up with the goals and objectives that they would like the city staff to try to achieve in a year's time. So their term begins in May and it ends in April, and so that's kind of the 12-month time period that we look at. So last May, the council members, of which there were 4 new council members at the time, joined 5 existing council members, and they got together and came up with what our objectives should be as a community and as an organization. The first objective that they put together was to review 10 ordinances by April of 2022. That is a large number of ordinances to review in a 12-month time period, almost one a month. That's a significant amount of additional work, but that is something that really is important to make sure that our laws as a community continue to be updated with the realities of our city. With that long process, which anytime you amend an ordinance, it requires 2 separate council meetings where the council has to agree on the wording of those changes, and then it has to be published in a newspaper for 20 days. The council in 2018 added an additional step really to try to increase public engagement. They added an additional council meeting where they would present to the community, this is what we're looking at doing, take in suggestions and comments from residents and business owners, and then see if they can incorporate some of those comments. And usually about a month later or so, it's brought back for a first reading or the first vote that they actually have on that amended ordinance. So with that longer process, they still were hoping to have 10 ordinances reviewed. Since May, so far, 4 ordinances have been reviewed and amended. That's our Downtown Business Improvement District, our Use on Review and Variance process, our Residential Camping Ordinance, and our Animal Ordinance. We are in the process right now of doing the discussions as well as first readings of our Food Truck Ordinance, Sidewalk Ordinance, Traffic, seasonal traffic, noise, contractor licensing, and property maintenance. All of which, of course, come with additional comments and ideas, suggestions that come from residents as well as business owners. So the council tries to incorporate all that to come up with really what's the most workable ordinance going forward. Beyond ordinance review, there were several other really important goals that they brought up. One was the implementation of the medical marijuana initiative that was passed by the voters last year. That ordinance has been adopted and fully approved, and we are going to be awarding our first licensees in a couple of weeks. I think we had about 17 or 18 applications. In addition, we have a new ward map. Wards are essentially the legislative or representative districts in our community. So in Sturgis, we have 2 council members that represent each district or each ward. We have 4 wards, and so that means we have 8 council members, and then we have 1 mayor. That mayor is the only position that's elected by everyone in the community. So that's called an at-large seat. So the mayor represents the entire community, and then there's 2 council members that represent each district or each ward. Every 10 years, of course, the federal government conducts a census, and then following the release of the information from that census, which occurred right around September, October this year, we have to take the data and then adjust the wards so that they're fairly close in the number of residents in each ward. They can't have a variance of more than 10% from the smallest ward to the largest ward. And so the planning and permitting has come up with several different scenarios. And at our next council meeting, the council will put it up for discussion to see what are some communities' thoughts on that. And then hopefully December 20th, have the first reading of approval of the new maps. And also we have a new meeting and document management system that's going to increase our transparency for the public, as well as get a lot of additional information out to the public. What this new system will allow is every time any topic is discussed at any council meeting or planning and zoning commission or library board meeting or parks meeting or municipal utility board meeting, that is going to be recorded. So if a resident wants to find out every time something has been discussed that's water rates, they would be able to type in water rates, and they would find out every time it's been discussed at a municipal utility board meeting or at a city council. And then they're able, through just a simple click, to pull up all the staff reports, all of the attachments, everything else. So it should make it a lot easier for residents to be able to be engaged with their government here. Voluntary annexations. We're continuing to provide information about benefits to annexation to 3 different areas. If those areas would like to voluntarily annex, the city would be working with them on that. We're continuing to review the Lakeside Adventure Park proposal, and I'll discuss that in a little bit. And we're also continuing to work on the 2019 flood recovery, and that also I'll discuss in a little bit. We are working to complete the infrastructure design and TIF for the Avalanche Road area. That's one of the council goals, knowing at the pace that our community is growing. In about 18 months, all of our available lots will have been built out. There won't be any additional lots left. And so a developer has come to the city that is looking at a large development in the Avalanche Road area. And so that large development has significant infrastructure upgrades. That's something that we are working on making sure that it's planned so that it would be a positive neighborhood and community and a community asset for years to come. And so as we're working through that, there's also a few grant opportunities to help assist in paying for some of the infrastructure that we've gone through. And we're also preparing the TIF documents and everything else so that hopefully that can start being discussed in January or February. And also, the council wanted to ensure that we completed the launch and rollout of our new rally brand. That's been completed, and I'll talk about it a little more in a few minutes. And then also to update the city's 5-year infrastructure plan, and that is scheduled to be done in January. In regards to infrastructure, the last 12 months we have seen a significant amount of infrastructure improvements in our community. The community center has new locker rooms that are under construction right now and should be done in about 3 weeks or so. Pool resurfacing, significant upgrades at our theater, including screens, sound systems, and also the reconstruction of the front parking lot. Significant upgrades at the community center, all said and done, all those upgrades together, probably about $400,000. Really, that's part of the council's desire in making sure that which is such a vital and important part of our community, really stays healthy and vibrant so that future generations of kids and families are able to really enjoy that. Also, we've done a significant amount of road reconstruction projects, and we're really at the point now that instead of doing just some of the chip and seal and bladder and blotter construction projects that the city did in the past, now we're actually getting to the point that some of the streets that are in the worst stages of repairs, we're actually constructing entire roads, which include bringing in brand new base and bringing in several lifts of asphalt on top of that so that they can last for a longer term. That's something that if you look at decades past, the city didn't necessarily have the resources to be able to do that, but now we do. So we're trying to make sure that these are roads that are going to be able to be last and also be maintained at a more affordable level for the next several decades. Also, and this is something that not a lot of people realize, our public works department does a tremendous amount of that work themselves. And so most of the base courses for all of our roads are done by our public works staff. That saves the city a significant amount of money. So when we are investing $300,000 or $400,000 a year on repaving, we're able to do 12 and 15 blocks, versus other communities where they don't have their public works do that. That usually gets them 4, 5, 6 blocks. So we're really able to stretch our resources an awful lot because of the hard work of our public works department. In addition, along Otter Road and Van Auker Canyon, that regional bike and recreational path is under construction. So now residents in that area continue to walk along the street, and that's what they've done for a generation. Once this project is done, they'll have a safe area to walk that actually connects a trailhead as well as our regional bike path, so that kids can safely walk to school. The animal shelter can walk the dogs a lot safer. That project should be completed next spring. That's a joint project between the DOT, where we got a grant, the city, and also a developer. And then also our wastewater treatment plant, that has been a significant and tremendous success. We're hoping by about December 20th that we'll be at the point that we'll be able to give a complete rundown of that project at the council meeting then. But it has been a fantastic success. It has been on time. It's been under budget. Looking at other communities that are a few months behind us at the timeline and the additional costs that they've had, we've had a significant savings, and it allows us to continue to grow into the future and also to meet the EPA's increasingly stringent requirements that with our previous lagoons we were not able to. And looking at the total amount of infrastructure we've done in 10 years, infrastructure upgrades in our community is valued at over $40 million. That's a huge, huge investment in our community. Roads, parks, buildings, everything else to really enhance our quality of life and quality of living here. The next item we have are some hot topics, just to make sure everyone is fully aware of those. The first, like I talked about earlier, was the City of Sturgis Motorcycle Rally logo. Earlier this year, which was one of the causes for the increased expenses that you could see in the general fund, was a $400,000 settlement that the city paid to SMRI. And I think it's important to make sure that everyone understands this, because unfortunately on social media, there are some people that frankly know better that are providing a lot of misleading information purposely, I think, to confuse why the city did this. SMRI was a not-for-profit community organization. It was not owned by the city. It wasn't controlled by the city. The city did have a representative on the board, but it was one member of, I think, 9 different board members of SMRI. SMRI held a lot of different intellectual property in relation to the rally. So anytime someone purchased any sort of merchandise that said Sturgis and had motorcycles associated with it, they would require royalties to be paid from the retailers of that. That was something that they were doing for several years, and they got compliance from a lot of the retailers, but not all of them. Rushmore Photo and Gifts challenged their ability to do that. In 2013 or 14, there was a jury award that sided with SMRI that awarded nearly $1 million to SMRI, saying that there was an infringement on their intellectual property. At that time, the city was the sole licensee of SMRI in regards to sponsorships, as well as social media platforms and the website. So during that time, the city was using that license to develop our Sturgis Motorcycle Rally brand and to license that to various different sponsors, Progressive, Jack Daniels and Budweiser and Coca-Cola and Harley Davidson. All of those various agreements make up our sponsorship program. That sponsorship program has returned hundreds of thousands of dollars every year to the city. That amount is included in our post-rally financial report that we release every year in October. That has helped us to be able to make all of those infrastructure improvements that we went over. When the jury awarded SMRI that large verdict, the city's contract was up for royalties. So the city did sign a new license agreement with SMRI. A couple years later, a federal appellate court overturned that jury verdict. In doing so, it invalidated the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally. It did not invalidate all of the intellectual property of SMRI, just Sturgis Motorcycle Rally. So what that meant is someone would be able to sell products that say Sturgis Motorcycle Rally on it and not have a license agreement with SMRI. It did not make SMRI go away. And so SMRI had several different agreements or license agreements with all sorts of different entities, including the city of Sturgis. So the city of Sturgis was still required to be a licensee of SMRI and to use their existing or their remaining intellectual property in our sponsorship program, whether or not that intellectual property would be able to generate hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that, of course, would threaten our ability to continue to grow our sponsorship program. In addition, it really would limit our ability to grow the program because, as in the past, we would have had to continue to work through SMRI to get agreement for any potential sponsor. And so that license agreement still lasted for almost another 10 years. So in order to allow the city to really make its own destiny and not have to work through another entity, the city council agreed to enter negotiations with SMRI to terminate that agreement. Ultimately, that agreement was terminated, and that required a $400,000 investment. That then allowed the city to develop our own brand, the Winged S brand, and that's what we began using in March. That brand, in less than 6 months, generated more than $100,000 of new sales and new sponsorship. We know that there's value in that brand, and we continue to get more and more interest in that. Now, in addition to that, SMRI did not go away, and that's something that is often said on social media, and that's not true. SMRI was not invalidated when the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally was invalidated. Their existing trademarks were able to continue to be enforced. So by separating ourselves from SMRI through that $400,000 settlement, we were able to make our own path. Now with that, the city was one of the largest licensees of SMRI, and so SMRI really essentially became insolvent and was not able to continue making their payments. And so SMRI now is at the point that they're starting to fold. So with that, their existing intellectual property, including the Monahan mark or the traditional rally logo, has been transferred to their main creditor, which is First Interstate Bank. That's why the city is entering negotiations with First Interstate Bank to see if we can acquire that Monahan mark. That is something that is ongoing. We're not sure how that's going to end. We are willing to pay up to $90,500 for that. And what would happen with that is if First Interstate agrees to that, it would be transferred to the city, and then the city would offer up that mark to be able to be used by different retailers. So in the past, Tom's Teas as well as Black Hill Rally and Gold have been the primary users of that. The royalties that would be collected from that, which would be similar to what they paid SMRI in the past, except this time 100% of the royalties received from that would be going to charities. And so it would be split, 50% going to Sturgis Rally charities annually, the other 50% going towards the newly established Sturgis Motorcycle Rally Endowment. The reason the council was steadfast in achieving that really long-term goal of building an endowment is to make sure that if the rally by 2050 is not as large of a rally, and if there's not a continuous significant amount of sponsorship revenue, the council wanted to make sure that there was some lasting legacy to make an impact on the community. And so that's why they wanted to build an endowment, so that every year, as there's additional revenue or as the Monahan mark gets used, that endowment can continue to grow. And then if at some point the rally starts to fade and not become as profitable for the community as it presently is, then there would still be revenue left over to help to continue to foster goodwill in the community. Now, the Lakeside Adventure Park, as most people know, that was a proposal that was made to the city council a few months ago. That was done by the Outdoor Aquatics Committee. The committee was formed about a year ago, and that was in response to a city proposal about 18 months ago to build a splash pad next to the community center. The city had a $200,000 budget to build a nice splash pad next to the community center. At the time, there was a lot of concern from some members of the public who wanted to see an outdoor swimming pool in addition to a splash pad. The city responded and said that we were not interested in doing an outdoor pool because of the cost of constructing it, and as well as the continual cost of operating that pool. That a splash pad would maybe not appeal to every demographic, but appeal to some people, and that's something that was affordable. However, there were still a lot of people who wanted to see some further aquatic kind of outdoor aquatic adventures, and so the city council invited anyone who was interested to apply to be on an ad hoc committee. And so out of that, about a dozen people applied, and so all of the individuals who applied were placed on the committee, and the committee began working for almost a year. When they first met, they were looking at a small pool next to the community center with a splash pad, and it would be a zero entry, and so it would kind of be a sloped entry so that anyone with disabilities or elderly, it's easy to get into, would be able to enter into the pool, to have some diving boards at the deep end, and then to also have a splash pad. The estimate to construct that was $2.2 million. And looking at other communities and their cost of operations for similar pools always exceed the revenue that is collected at the gate, anywhere from $30,000 to about $70,000. And so looking at a cost of the city of $2.2 million and knowing that there would be an annual subsidy of $30,000 to $70,000 a year, and then really questioning whether that would be an attraction. There were a lot of individuals on the committee who really felt that if that was built, you're not really going to attract more people from Spearfish or Rapid City to come here because they already have outdoor pools. And you probably wouldn't even keep a lot of people in Sturgis here because Rapid City and Spearfish aren't very far away. And if they have bigger and better and cooler outdoor pools, they would still go there. And so with that, they kind of said, maybe that doesn't make sense. So then the next step was to say, let's build the biggest and best in the Black Hills. And so to reconstruct essentially what Spearfish has, that was estimated at about $12 million. And so, of course, to be bigger and better than Spearfish, it would be more than 12 million, somewhere around 14 to 16, maybe $18 million. And in addition to that, looking at Spearfish, their city has to subsidize their annual operations of that park by about $200,000 to $250,000 a year. So not only are you investing that much money to construct it up front, but every year you're continuing to subsidize that. The committee really felt that that was pretty irresponsible, and so said that doesn't necessarily make sense. And so the next idea that was brought forward is a concept that has been used in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Indiana, Kentucky, several locations where they build an outdoor lake. That's far more affordable to construct, even though it's a lot more water. The reason why is you don't have all the concrete and the plaster and all that sort of building materials, which are incredibly expensive. And then you're able to have a large body of water that you can add all sorts of different amenities. And those amenities can evolve over time. And so if in 3 or 4 years they start to get a little stale, there's a different amenity that can be added, whether it's a water skiing line or a zip line or various different amenities that different parks have. The cost to construct that was anticipated to be about $3.5 million. And so again, far more affordable than the $12 million plus idea. Even with that though, $3.5 million is a lot of money. And so to make that as affordable as possible, then they said perhaps it should be built at the fairgrounds. Since the city already owns the fairgrounds, a portion of that could be used as a housing development so that the money that is raised from selling off lots could be used to construct it, as well as a TIF district could be formed there to actually pay for the construction of it. In total, that would generate nearly $3 million. So from that, there would be about $500,000 left to build the entire park. Of that, the committee said about half of it they would be willing to raise. So they would ask the city to fund it by $250,000, $300,000. That's a lot easier of a request than $2 million and far easier than $12 million. So that was their proposal to the city council, and that was made a few months ago. The city council took that information and hired a consultant to come up with an actual cost estimate for the construction to see if 3.5 million is realistic, because if it's 6 million or 12 million, it's not really realistic, and so it's easy to cross that project off the list. And then in addition to that, to come up with 3 potential site plans at the fairgrounds and also a business plan. So looking at other communities and other areas that have run these, how many people does it take to operate it? What are the costs that they charge coming in? Is it really economically feasible so that the city does not have to continually subsidize that annually every year by hundreds of thousands of dollars? In addition to that, there were 6 or 7 questions that were brought forward and submitted by the community and various committees that the consultant is going to provide answers for. They're continuing to work on that, and their plan right now tentatively is to present their findings to the council on December 20th. From that, if the project makes sense, in other words, that economically it's feasible to be built and also to operate long term, and if the questions can satisfactorily be answered, then the council is going to weigh whether or not the fairgrounds make sense. The council is looking at 2 other areas as well as potentially locations where it could be built. So there's 3 different areas that it's looking at as potential sites. But again, that's only if it makes sense, if it truly is in that price range to build it and to continue to operate it, which we don't know yet, but hopefully we'll know soon. The 2019 flood recovery, that again, over 2 years ago, but like any disaster, it takes a long time to work with FEMA, as our FEMA reps assure us that the F in FEMA does not stand for fast, and so it's a long process anytime you work with them. The cleanup has been fully completed and has been partially repaid from FEMA. The reconstruction of the Bear Butte Creek Bank has been completed. There were different areas that had to be reconstructed. A portion of that has been reimbursed by FEMA, but the vast majority of it has not been reimbursed by FEMA. We've been told within about 18 months or so we might get a partial reimbursement from that. The 7th Street crossing, that has been designed and has been submitted to FEMA. At this point, we do not know yet if FEMA is going to be approving it. We continue to get updates from them every 2 weeks, and so far it has not yet been approved by the state level FEMA, which that has to be done first, and then it gets submitted to the federal. The reason that has to go through this longer process is when it was constructed, a long time ago, before 2010, when it was constructed, it was not permitted by FEMA, and that was a mistake. Since it was not permitted by FEMA, FEMA now is requiring and has required a hydrological study to be done to show that if it gets reconstructed, it would not increase the flood level of everyone or anyone upstream. And so that's a long process that we're still going through. Once FEMA approves it, if they do approve it, then we have to see if FEMA is willing to assist in the payment for it, because they don't have to, because it was not built originally as permitted by FEMA. And so that's something we've requested that they would do. The Sly and Blanche crossings have been reconstructed, but those also were built originally without approval from FEMA, so we're having to go through this process with FEMA. And then the 15th Street crossing, that is on private property outside the city limits and also was not permitted when it was constructed. The city has offered to assist in paying to reconstruct it, but so far the residents in the county have not also agreed. And so right now, there's no work being done on that crossing. So just in summary, 2021 was challenging. Unfortunately, it's been 2 tough years in a row. We're all hoping 22 is going to be a little easier on everyone. Without a doubt, there have been a lot of new challenges, and it seems like every month there are new challenges that we weren't anticipating. But in spite of all those additional challenges and a lot of the changing attitudes in the community and also nationally and everything else, in spite of all those challenges, we are growing faster than we ever have as a community. We have better infrastructure and better services than ever, and we're more financially secure than we have been in decades. And that really is because of the hard work and effort from all of you in this room. Our city staff continually goes above and beyond to make sure that our community is a great place to live and to work and to come and visit. And because of that, we are seeing a significant difference. And so thank you guys for all of your work. You do a tremendous job, and every year it never ceases to amaze me to see what our coworkers, what we're all willing to do and what we continue to do. It makes a huge difference for us as a community. Our continued growth and also our continued efficiency also in the future is going to allow us to continue to reinvest in infrastructure. We have scheduled more than $7.5 million in new infrastructure in the next 5 years. That's significant improvements that will make a difference in the quality of life for us as a community. And those are all improvements that would not require any additional loans or debt or anything else. That's just from revenue coming in because we're growing as a community and we're doing better with tourism as a community and more people are shopping locally. Also, we are going to continue to reinvest in recreation, including park enhancements, upgrades at our community center, and library enhancements. We'll be able to invest more than $1 million in new equipment over the next 5 years that will help make all of our jobs easier so that we can have the right tools to do the jobs that we need. And also, as a further kind of sign of appreciation for our employees, because of our continued growth and efficiency, we're able to offer a 4.5% COLA next year. That's 50% higher than our contracted amount. But really, I think it shows our council's continued commitment to all of us as employees to really appreciate everything that we do and to say that the council really is standing behind you guys, that you do a tremendous job, and the council appreciates all you do. So thank you. Are there any questions? Oh, come on. You can't just say no. You're the first group not to have any.
All right, tell me this. What exactly does TIF stand for?
Okay, sure. So TIF stands for Tax Increment Financing. And sometimes it might be called TIF or TIF-D or TID, and that's because Tax Increment Financing District. All of that's correct. What that means is an area where there's going to be a significant amount of development, you're able to set up a TIF district. And essentially what you do is you draw a circle around the area that's going to be developed. And then you look at the current assessed value of it. So that becomes the new baseline. And so, for example, if an area that's going to have development maybe as mostly vacant, raw land that is assessed at, say, $1 million, you are then, if you create a district around it, you're able to say that $1 million of assessed value could grow to $20 million of assessed value. There could be additional development there that would increase the overall assessment, and it could increase it by $19 million. But in order to do that, there needs to be improvements made to that property. Maybe parks, recreation, infrastructure needs to be brought in. There needs to be all these different improvements made to it. So what you can do is project and say, if it's going to increase in value by 19 million, that would generate each year about $270,000 of new taxes and new property taxes if development were to occur on it. So you can then take that and say that $270,000, you can project that out over up to 20 years and say all that money could be available to repay a loan that you can take out as a developer, not as a city, but as a developer, you can take out a loan to make those improvements on that property. And so that's how you're able to increase the infrastructure, build the amenities, build the parks, everything else that people want on that to entice or to make it affordable for development to occur. And that's how communities in South Dakota have been growing for 20 years. Now, in Sturgis, before the last several years, there's been a lot of hesitancy to do a lot of TIF districts, but that's how you're able to actually get growth to occur, because the cost of actually building a subdivision is incredibly high. And without a TIF district, it really makes it completely unaffordable for any home to be built. And that's really when you look at Brookings and other communities that have really nice park systems and things like that, huge portions of that are paid for through TIFs. For example, Sky Ridge, I think, in Spearfish, that's under construction right now, where there's significant athletic fields and parks and everything else that are going in. A large portion of that's being paid for through a TIF. And so that's how, if you're able to see an area that's going to be growing, if you think kind of proactively, you're able to capture some of that additional property tax growth to make the improvements necessary to see that growth occur. And then once those loans are paid for, then it just goes on to the property tax rolls, and the county, the city, and the school district gets additional revenue. And so it's a way to provide new improvements without charging the current taxpayers more. Good question, though. Hopefully that made sense.
On the permits,
Mm-hmm.
there was, from this year to last year, there were like 29 permits last year, 93 this year. But the money amount...
Oh, the valuation was different? Okay. Last year, it was at $44 million, I think, as the total valuation of the permits. $12 million of that was our wastewater treatment plant. So if you would take that out, it was really probably around $32 million as increased valuation in the city. Right now, we're at I think it was 24,600,000 or so in permits, but the number of new housing was much higher than last year. Number one, last year there was a lot of commercial development and industrial development, and so that wasn't in the 29. The 29 was just new single-family permits, so that's all that those were showing. The other thing is, though, for this year, of our new housing permits, 50 of the, I think it's 92 that we have so far, or 93, whatever that number was, 50 of those are for the senior housing project that's being built on Moose and Dolan. In that $24 million of valuation, that only includes the site work and the footing plan. So there's only about $600,000 or $700,000 in that $24 million. That project's really going to be permitted probably at about $8 million. So there's another $7 million or so that needs to be added to that. So the numbers will make a lot more sense at the end of the year. We're not quite there yet.
Is that all that's being built on that corner, or is there
on? Yeah, so it's a 3-story senior living. So on the ground floor, there are assisted living units. And then on the second and third floor, there are independent senior living units. And then on Ferguson is a street behind it. That's going to be a brand new cul-de-sac. And so right now it's kind of a rural county road section that's going to be improved. So it's a normal cul-de-sac. There's going to be 3 townhomes, so 6 housing units that will be built on that as well.
What's the total number of units that will be in that assisted living?
That'll be 50 in the 3-story building, and then 3 townhomes, so 6 extra that'll face Ferguson. So 56 in total when it's done. Which
townhomes be senior living, or just?
The developer's not sure yet if they're gonna put them up for sale or continue to own them or rent them. I don't know. We'll see. The 3-story building is supposed to be done, or scheduled to be done, next October. The townhomes, we'll see when they start, but probably next year is when those will start. Anything else? No? All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming.